Top 10 US serial killers you didn't know exist. Number 10, Ronaldo Rivera. Between 1999 and 2000, Rivera abducted and killed 4 women in a series of slayings in Georgia and South Carolina. He was convicted of 1 count of murder in Georgia and sentenced to death. Now 58, Rivera is on death row at Georgia Diagnostic and Classification State Prison. Number 9, Posty Lasky, also known as the Cincinnati Strangler. Between 1965 and 1966, Lasky killed 7 women, most of them elderly, in a series of slayings. He was convicted of 1 count of first-degree murder. The jury did not make a recommendation for mercy, and Lasky received a mandatory death sentence. His sentence was commuted to life in prison in 1972 after the Supreme Court temporarily ruled capital punishment unconstitutional. Lasky applied for parole on several occasions, but was denied each time. He died in prison on May 29, 2007 at the age of 68. Number 8, Dimitri Yakovlev. Between 2003 and 2007, Yakovlev, a Russian surgeon, killed 3 people and subsequently exploited their identities. He was convicted in federal court of 15 counts of aggravated identity theft, credit card fraud, and bank fraud stemming from the murders, and sentenced to 30 years in prison. The conduct here is extraordinary. It shocks the conscience. Prosecutor James Gatter said while asking for a life sentence. Judge Leo Glasser settled on the lesser term after telling the defence that giving Yakovlev no more than 9 years as it wanted would be an affront to common sense. Dimitri's wife Julia, who prosecutors did not believe was involved directly in the murders, received a 3-year sentence after pleading guilty to credit card fraud and aggravated identity theft. She was released from prison on May 16, 2014. Oddly enough, Dimitri's name does not appear on the BOP website, which means he must be entered under a different name. Assuming he is still alive and given time for served and time off for good behaviour, Dimitri will be released from prison around 2035 when he is in his late 60s. Number 7, Lester Brocklehurst, the crime Tory. In 1937, Brocklehurst killed at least 3 men in a series of robbery slayings across Illinois, Texas, and Arkansas. He was aided by his girlfriend Bernice Fulton. Brocklehurst was convicted of first-degree murder in Arkansas and sentenced to death. Upon hearing the verdict, he fainted and had to be carried to his cell. His father also collapsed. To the public's dismay, Felton was acquitted of murder in Arkansas. She and her father were transported to stay the night at a tourist camp, as the locals were likely to attack them if they were seen on the streets. Brocklehurst was executed by electrocution at the Tucker unit in Arkansas on March 18, 1938, at the age of 24. He gave a 12-minute statement, ending with a rant about his affair with Bernice. Brocklehurst's last words were reportedly the following: "The only thing that brought me down to this was a slight love affair with the girl. I don't want her to get the chair, but she is just as guilty as I." Felton did face additional federal charges for transporting the stolen car of one of Lester's victims across state lines. She was found guilty, and after the judge harshly admonished the jury which acquitted her of murder, sentenced to the maximum term allowed, 5 years in prison. After her release, Felton married in 1948 and had a son in Baltimore in 1949. He died aged 16 in an automobile accident. After that marriage ended, she married again and became the mother of 8 more children, but that marriage too ended in the early 1960s. Bernice died in 2007 at the age of 88. She is buried at Rockford, Illinois. Number 6, Charles Barr, also known as the Petting Party Bandit. In 1923, Barr killed 3 people in a series of attacks on lovers' lanes, arming one of his victims. He was arrested after a stolen item he'd pawned off was traced back to him. Barr was convicted of 1 count of first-degree murder, sentenced to death, and executed by electrocution at the Tennessee State Prison in Nashville on August 20, 1926. He was in his early 20s at the time of the execution. Barr reportedly went to his death without a whimper. Number 5, Ralph Fabba. Between 1999 and 2000, Fabba killed 3 people. His father, ex-girlfriend and a 16-year-old, pleaded guilty to 1 count of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Fabba later pleaded no contest to 2 more counts of second-degree murder and was sentenced to an additional 25 years in prison. Now 44, Fabba is serving his sentence at Martin Correctional Institution and is scheduled for release on July 29, 2059, when he will be 81 years old. Number 4, Ronda Martin. Between 1937 and 1951, Martin poisoned 6 family members with arsenics for insurance money. She was convicted of 1 count of first-degree murder, sentenced to death, and executed by electrocution at Kilby Prison in Alabama on October the 11th, 1957, at the age of 50. Martin's last meal consisted of hamburger, mashed potatoes, cinnamon rolls and coffee. She had no last words. Number 3, David Bruce. In 2005, Bruce odd, robbed and murdered 3 women. He was convicted of 1 count of aggravated murder. Bruce was spared a possible death sentence when the jury did not find him guilty of the specifications required to impose one, and instead sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. He is serving his sentence at Chillicothe Correctional Institution and will become eligible for parole on April 12, 2035, when he will be 71 years old. Number 2, Matthew Johnson. Between 2000 and 2001, Johnson killed at least 3 Essex workers and drug addicts. He was convicted of 3 counts of murder and sentenced to 60 years in prison for each murder, to be served consecutively for a total of 180 years. Johnson is currently serving his sentences at Cheshire Correctional Institution. His de facto release date is January 13, 2182. Number 1, Robert Maudsley. Also known as Hannibal the Cannibal and the Brain Eater, is an Englishman convicted of multiple murders. Mosley killed 4 people, with one of the killings taking place in a psychiatric hospital and 2 in prison after receiving a life sentence for murder. Initial reports falsely stated he ate part of the brain of one of the men he killed in prison, which earned him the nickname Hannibal the Cannibal from parts of the British press, and the Brain Eater amongst other prisoners. National newspapers were advised that the allegations were untrue, according to the post-mortem report. Mosley is the longest-serving British prisoner in solitary confinement.